Now, after doing all these introductions, let me, before going to the single monad model, let me explain to you who is the greatest master, Muhyiddin ibn al-Arabi, from whom I took all these ideas and combined them to make the single monad model and duality of time theory. So his name is Muhammad ibn al-Arabi, or he is actually titled Muhyiddin, the reviver of religion. His full name is Muhammad ibn Ahmad Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn al-Arabi. Okay, he lived in about 700 or 800 years ago. He was actually born in the eastern part of Andalusia in the year 560 Hijri, corresponding to 1165 AD. But he moved first between the different cities of Andalusia and the northern African cities like Fez and Tunisia. And then after about 35 or 38 years, when he was 38 years old, he moved to the east for Hajj, and then he never returned to the west. He lived in Mecca for a while, and then he traveled between the cities in the east, for example, Baghdad, Aleppo, Syria, Anatolia. He even visited Egypt and Palestine. He lived between these cities until he finally settled in Damascus, until he passed away in the year 638 Hijri, corresponding to 1240 AD. So this picture here is the entrance to his mausoleum in Damascus, in the mountain of Qasiyun, where you must enter here downstairs about 10 steps, and then inside here his grave, where people always visit him every day. And when you enter, you will read these different verses and writings from different poets. Here, for example, he writes this one famous verse from his diwan. He says in Arabic, فَلِكُلِّ عَصْرٍ وَاحِدٌ يَسْمُو بِهِ وَأَنَا لِبَاقِ الْعَصْرِ ذَاكَ الْوَاحِدُ. I can roughly translate it as, for every or in every era there is only one person by which or by whom it excels, and I am that one for the rest of the age. And he is truly that one, yes. And this is one verse from Quran. It says, نَبِّئْ عِبَادِي أَنِّي أَنَا الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ. Tell my servants that I am the forgiver and the merciful. Okay, now we can start introducing the single monad model of the cosmos. So my studies and readings of the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn Arabi started actually in the early 1990s, although I was actually informally reading his many books, and my main interest at that time was his interpretation of various verses and chapters in the Quran, especially the chapter of Joseph, because the main story of Joseph, the esoteric interpretation of it is that the human heart, is actually going through different spiritual behavior or existence from his very existence when one is born until he goes through the different stages until he perish and annihilate in the presence of God, so that he can come back again in a new level of existence. So what I want to conclude out of all this in relation to our subject is that this figure here that I chose to put on the cover of the book, which reads in Arabic, أصبحت فيك من الضنا كالنقطة المتوهمة. In English we can say, I became in your love like one abstract point. So the idea is that one is created out of one point and is returning to this one point every time, every moment of time. Although we don't feel it, but we are actually every moment, and therefore our whole life actually is to return to realize our first existence, and therefore when you return to this point, you will actually enter a new existence, and always coming between existence and non-existence all the time. So this is the idea of recreation. It started from here, actually very early in 1990s, but actually the formal study started in around 2000 or at the end of 1999, where I decided to really study the concept of time and cosmology, or the creation theories according to the greatest master Muhyiddin ibn Arabi. That's why I actually selected this figure to be the logo of the single monad model. This is the importance of it. So that was followed by my first book on the subject, Ibn Arabi, Time and Cosmology, that was published in 2005 and republished again several times, actually this one, and then another edition with a different title and slightly different contents focused on the single monad model was published first in 2014. However, during this time, after 2005 until maybe 2014 or even 16, not much really happened until suddenly I realized that I can convert this model into a complete theory, which I will just come to it after a while, which is the duality of time theory. But before I do that now, let me tell you very briefly what is Ibn Arabi's idea of creation, starting from the first levels of creation until the creation of the physical world. So what he says is that when Allah, God the Exalted, the creator of the universe, decided or wanted to create things, he first created different or undefined number, unknown number of what the greatest master called the roaming spirits. And they are roaming or consumed in the presence of God. The reason of that is that because Allah, the Exalted, created them directly without any previous stage or any previous creation. That's why they know nothing but Him. They even don't realize their own existence. So that's why they are called roaming or consumed in the presence of God. However, when Allah wanted to create the world in which we exist now, Allah appointed one of these roaming spirits, one of these spirits, and thus He manifested to him in a manner which imprinted in him what Allah wanted to create through him or by him until the last day. That's why this spirit is thus called the first intellect, because he understood or he intellectualized what Allah wanted to create. And also it's called the pen, or the first pen, or the higher pen, okay? Because it actually does this creation by a process of writing, just as we normally write with a pen. We start by putting a point or a dot, and then we move on to make letters one by one. In the same manner, this pen, or the universal intellect, which is also the single monad, and actually it has many other names, all equivalent names, different depending on the perspectives. So this single monad, or the higher pen, or the first intellect, is writing in the shadow in which Allah created from him, since Allah is called the light. So when Allah manifested to this pen, it has a shadow formed. So Allah ordered him to write in this shadow what Allah wanted to create. This shadow is thus called the protected tablet, or the universal soul, and therefore the world actually exists in this universal soul, which is defined by, or characterized by two forces. One is the force to move, and one is the force to know, the force of knowledge and the force of motion or providence. So these two forces are actually the two sources of symmetry, the physical world and the psychical worlds. When they complement together, they form one ultimate symmetry, and when they separate, they form different levels. We exist in one level. Actually, we exist in two levels, in both of them. But we normally feel the physical world, and we tend to ignore our inner self. But actually, they are symmetrical. We see the world outside just as a reflection of what is inside. Anyway, this is really a little bit complicated, and I don't want to dive into these complicated concepts before we really want to go to our main subject, that is physical existence. So the existence started with first multiplying these two levels into 4, and that's exactly because of the complex nature. You know that complex numbers in mathematics have two components, one real and one imaginary, and therefore you can have 4 different states, either 0, 1, or 1, 0, or 0, 0, or full, or CC in our case. I'll come to this in a moment. But actually from here we find the first quadratic rule, which is the divine quadratic rule, and from it comes the 4 elements, the hot or the heat and dryness and coldness and wet. So these are the levels of nature, although nature itself was not created yet, but the concepts of nature is there implemented in the universal soul before the creation that will appear later in this prime matter. So before I show you the contents of this prime matter, where the universe is going to appear, let me comment further on this divine quadratic rule. So this divine quadratic rule, Ibn Arabi shows in a nice figure here, where the divine essence have 4 characteristics or 4 descriptions which are necessary for him or for the essence of God to be described as God, as a omnipotent God. Because anyone who is described by these 4 characters, he is like God. However, only one is described by these 4 characters or attributes to the full extent. Also, we are ourselves have these attributes, but they are limited in us. So these 4 attributes, which are living, knowing, willing, and ability, anyone have these 4 attributes with unlimited aspects, then he is God. But only one God exists who has those 4 abilities or those 4 attributes. So God is living, God is knowing, all living, he is willing without any limit, and also he is able without any limit. We are also living and knowing and willing and able, but we have limits, and we are limited by what Allah created in us. So from here we find the 4 aspects of the divine essence, and therefore we have 4 presences, actually 5, because the essence itself is the 5th. So 1 plus 4, this is a basic divine quadratic rule on which the whole cosmos is actually based. We have, for example, the 4 in physics, we have the 4 fundamental interactions plus the 5th. Actually, some people say that there is a 5th force, but actually the 5th force is itself included here, which is magnetism. So we don't have it separate, but we have electromagnetism. The magnetism is the initial force of the single monad. That's why the single monad is a monoball of magnetic. So like if we want to translate this into the modern physics, we can say it is magnetism, and then electromagnetism, and then electroweak, and so on, until we have gravity in the end. And then here we have also other reflections like the fire, earth, water, and air. And also we have the soul, the intellect, nature, and chaos. So there are many levels of this quadratic rule. Let me also show you this in a different way. And this is here, it shows you the complex nature of time. So as I said, since we have 2 levels of time, they either can be 0, 0, so 0 internal time, 0 external time, or full, both of them. So the real time, which is motion at the speed of light, real time also motion in the outer time at the speed of light. But this is an extreme case. So this is the extreme case of fire or energy, but actually this is dark energy because it exists in a uniform space that has no interaction with any other thing. And actually all these 4 states and then their conjugate states, which make together 8, they are actually extreme states which do not exist really in nature, but they are actually extremes. So we arrive to them when there is no more creation. The actual creation, for example, here we have C0. We don't have actually C0, we have CV. So C, creation at the speed of light, V, the outer time, we have some velocity, some motion. If we don't have motion, if we don't have time in the outer time, then we have like death, we have flat space without anything else, and therefore this is like vacuum. So these states are extreme states, do not really exist. Practically, they exist at some initial or small velocity, like objects that are not moving or moving only internally. So either we have 0, 0, C0 for normal matter, or 0C for antimatter. You see the symmetry here, and then also we have another symmetry here. This symmetry, when combined together, it breaks to this other symmetry. So actually what's happening is that the world is mixing like this earth and fire, which is the sky. So the sky and the earth are mixing to produce water and air, and the air and water are mixing again to go back to fire and earth. So the world is perpetually going or bearing and breaking. This symmetry is bearing and breaking every moment of time. But our physical world is only created out of water. So out of this vacuum, which is actually a state in quantum mechanics called the Bose-Einstein condensate, which is actually like one state where there is no interaction at all. So this is like inner time without outer time, only creation without motion. The same is also here, but this is actually opposite or orthogonal. So that's why we have matter and antimatter. They are the same thing, only existing on two orthogonal arrays of time. Anyway, let's skip this now and go on to describe more. Actually, I explained all this kind of symmetry and levels of symmetry in my book called Ultimate Symmetry, where I have 4 levels of symmetry based on this, actually 5 levels. As I said before, we have the initial level of oneness plus 4 levels. With every one of these levels, we gain new abilities. So in the normal world, in the normal physical world, we have only normal symmetry, like the conservation of energy or the symmetry of normal objects. With this, we have only the willing, we have the acceptance to do things. And then when this combined with the supersymmetrical world, we gain knowledge. When the physical world interact or pair with the psychical world, we gain knowledge. And then as we go to the higher level of hypersymmetry, we gain the living, which is the motion or the spirit. And then with the ultimate symmetry, we gain the ability to do things. However, altogether, when we take them all together, we get the oneness. But of course, absolute oneness is only for God, and we cannot reach this absolute oneness. We only live in these 4 levels at the best. So let me again move on to explain the contents of the prime matter or the chaos. So after creating nature, the level of nature, the first thing to appear is the prime matter, in which the prime or universal body, in which there is the throne, which contains the universe, including all the stars and galaxies, and then the local galaxy and local stars. So the level of the throne is the level of external or outside galaxies, and then outside all this there is the isotropic orb, where there is no where there is this is the furthest orb beyond which there is no more matter. So this is the first appearance of matter. This is like the Big Bang in the new modern theory. So the world started to appear, forming galaxies, and then inside the main galaxy in which we are living, there is a solar system and the local stars, which will appear here in what we call the pedestal or al-kursi, the chair, on which God is sitting, but not in the physical sense. God actually is mounting all over the throne, mounting in one of the verses in Quran, Allah says, the merciful mounted on the throne. So the throne contains the kursi, the pedestal, and the pedestal contains the earth and the heavens. So now the contents of the pedestal are explained here. Okay, and as you see now, the pedestal is square, or it has 4 sides, and that's because of the quadratic rules that I spoke about first. So the first thing to appear inside it are the 12 zodiac signs, which contains the farthest galaxy or clusters of galaxies, and then below and between those levels there are the heavens, the paradise levels, 7 levels of paradise, and then below all that is the surface of the fixed stars. However, these stars are not really fixed, as the greatest master actually showed, and he even gave approximate values of the proper motion of stars, and he clearly says that stars are really moving, but we don't realize their motion because of our limited lifetime. And this is has been confirmed only in the early 19th century. So the greatest master have been knowing this more than 800 years ago or 700 years ago. So the physical world which we are living in appears inside here, which I'm going to show. As you can see, I'm actually moving very quickly because we really want to go to our main subject, that is deriving the principles of our theory, quantum theory of relativity, including also special and general relativity. So inside the orb of fixed stars appears the solar system with different levels of heavens and different levels of earth. As you can see here, the earth is actually flat, okay, but not in the physical sense, of course. In the physical sense, the earth is spherical, and it is, it rotates around the sun, and it rotates around itself. So this is known physically, and even the greatest master, he spoke many things about how the earth rotates around itself and around its center. However, in the real sense, in the real fact, when we take the creation and the motion in time and in space, the actual shape of the earth is really flat. And there are 7 levels, because every sky or every heaven have its own earth. The meaning of this is actually, the meaning of the earth here is a dimension. And therefore, for every dimension of heavens, we have a dimension of earth which is like vacuum and void. So there are higher vacuum and lower vacuum. Okay, so the earth here is like the ground state. So we have 7 ground states. So you can think of them like 7 fields or 7 states. I will maybe explain that later. But very simply now we can say that, for example, the heavens is like CC, a complex number with a creation on both inner and outer time. That's why it takes spherical. So it's like a wave. And the earth is like lower vacuum, where we have only real time without any outside time, and therefore it's like 2-dimensional plane, which is a ground state. Okay, so let me move on really more quickly to explain or to conclude the main idea of the single monad model of the cosmos. So based on all these introductions, we conclude that the whole cosmos, every part, every single point in the cosmos, in the geometry, is being recreated at every instance of time. Recreated by the single monad, which is also called the real, or the real through whom creation takes place. So this real, or this monad, takes a form at one instance, and then takes another form at another instance, and so on. It scans the whole universe. Actually, every one movement, every one point, it takes 1 week of creation, but of course we feel this as one single instance of time. So this is not like the week in which we are living. That's why time actually and the days interfere with each other in a way that I will show in a moment. It's actually really very complicated. That's why I'm struggling actually to show you the main ideas. But if you want really to understand, you have to really read all these complicated things, how time is really flowing internally and externally. But in short, this single monad is making a point or appearance and then another appearance, and so on, repeating itself, copying itself. And since we exist on this level of creation, we see this whole picture at once. However, we only see it after it's created. That's why we see the world in a continuous space. Okay? So in reality, there is discrete symmetry. There are granular or separate points. But we see them continuous because we exist in this level. We find ourselves here after the world is created. And this is actually very clearly said in Quran. Allah said in one verse in Quran, I made them not to witness their creation or the creation of the world and the creation of themselves. So we are not really witnessing how the world is being created. We only see the world after its creation, and that's why we feel it's continuous and we feel our continuous existence. Therefore, we actually live in imaginary time. And there is a real time. In this real time, the world is being created in 6 days, and then it appears on the outside in the 7th day. So this monad is alternating between the two levels of earth and sky, or void and vacuum, and therefore 7 times. That's why we have 7 earths and 7 heavens. So as you can see in the end, if you really understand these religious verses and theory of creation, you can combine and you can really interpret it in a way that is really scientific, although it looks to us like ancient or some old theories, but actually it's fully scientific when you understand it correctly. And actually, even in ancient philosophy, it's said that Plotinus have said once that from the one, only one can proceed, which is actually correct. But still, we don't see that. We see multiplicity from the one. We have one creator, and then we have multiple creation. So how the multiple creations are proceeding or emitting from one God? To understand this, the greatest master add at a time. So from the one, only one can proceed at a time. From the real, only one creation can proceed at a time, not at once. At once, at our level of existence, we see multiplicity. But at the real instance of time, we see only one creation. And that's why we have seen this verse that is written on the entrance of the greatest master. He says, for every era there is only one person by whom it excels, only one person, and I am the one for the rest of the age, which means that he have reached the level of the real, or being the level of real existence. That's why many people believe that Ibn Arabi actually exists in all the time. But anyway, this is not our subject now. So in the result, the world is actually created in a way just exactly similar to how we observe, for example, a movie, or ourselves when we are now recording videos on a computer or TV. There is no actual motion, there is actually recreation. So the apparent motion that we see is only a change of place or a change of state, but actually nothing is moving, but everything is being recreated. So that's why I show you this figure here, where you see here the colors, for example, are not really, the cells themselves are not really moving, but the colors of each cell are floating and therefore changing every moment, and therefore we imagine that there is a motion. However, in the reality, there is only a change. So if you look from the outside, you see continuous motion. If you look from the real, from the actual process of creation, from the inner process of time, you only see discrete change. You only see reappearance or recreation, and therefore granular geometry. This is the main point of the single monad model, and also the duality of time, that I will come to it in a moment. So in the end, we have creation in 6 days, and then appearance of this creation on the 7th day. However, these days of creation are interfering or taken out from each other, and therefore the dimensions appear. This is actually a little bit complicated. Maybe I will not be able to explain everything here in short way, but just to show you that this creation process is similar to the creation of 3 dimensions. So we get interfering days of creation, and also interfering yet in another way that is even more complicated. You can maybe go to some articles that I have written about this, how the days or the dimensions actually are intertwined with each other. So in reality, when we are living in our normal days or normal weekdays, at every point we are seeing various points from the actual days of creation. So for example, this white square here, so this white shape, white star here, is, for example, Sunday, but the real Sunday, Sunday of Advent, or the actual Sunday of creation. So this is distributed all over the world. At some point, for example, we are morning, at other point we are evening, at other point we are maybe other time. However, when we go on, we see different moments from different points or days of creation that are mixed with our normal days in which we are living. I'm not sure if you really understand this. Actually, it took me a long time to really understand this complicated concept. Some of the statements of the greatest master took me maybe 10 years to understand. But actually it was a rewarding, after all, rewarding time that I get in the end.